If you are tweeting or posting on social media, we welcome you to include PSMLA1 and hashtag PSMLA21 so we can see and share all of your thoughts. Mary's contact information is there on the screen. And Mary, if you have other contact information for social media that you'd like to share later, please do. For attendance purposes, please be sure that your displayed name matches the name used to register for the conference. If you're unsure how to do that, you can send me a message in the chat and I will be happy to provide you with instructions. Please join me in welcoming Mary to PSMLA.
Hi, everyone. I always love coming to PSMLA. I'm really excited that this year it's on Zoom because it makes everything so much easier for everyone. So today we're going to talk about developing communicative and cultural competence using authentic resources. Some of you may remember me from other presentations in the past. I work with Pearson, what used to be Pearson, now it's Savvas. And our latest program for Spanish is called Auténtico. We leverage a lot of authentic resources, but you know what? I am sort of parking Auténtico for now, and we're just going to talk about pedagogy. We're just going to talk about strategies that you can use to leverage authentic resources to build cultural and communicative competence. So in today's session, we know that our goals for using authentic resources, we know that they increase communicative proficiency, and we know that we can use authentic resources to develop intercultural competence. Now, I want to stress intercultural competence because it's important to understand how our cultures connect to each other. Not only how Hispanic cultures connect, but also how our cultures connect to the cultures around us. So we're going to be doing a lot of, or we're going to be encouraging our students to do a lot of introspective work and really be a little meta with their awareness of culture, right? That's going to allow them to make those connections to other cultures. One of the things that I want us to be aware of are these 4 domains of global competence brought to us by the Asia Society in about 2005. And so these 4 domains of global competence are to investigate the world. We're asking students to investigate the world beyond their own immediate environment, which is really important. To recognize perspectives, we're asking students to recognize their own and other people's perspectives. To communicate ideas, we're asking students to communicate their ideas efficiently and with diverse audiences. And we're asking them to take action. So we're asking students to translate their ideas into appropriate actions to improve conditions or their environment, to make some type of change. One of the ways that we can do that is using this model. This is called the image model. Perhaps we are aware of it already. I like it because it's really easy to remember, but it helps us sort of develop a strategy to get our students engaged with other cultural topics. So we're asking students we're going to be using images to make observations with our students. We're asking students to analyze some additional information that they notice, to generate a hypothesis about cultural perspectives, and then not to stop there at our hypothesis, but then to explore the perspectives and reflect further, right? So often we make a statement, we notice something, and that's where we stop, right? We're going to encourage our students to explore those ideas and those hypotheses to have a deeper understanding of what they're experiencing and what they're watching. Because this is October, And because we are so close to Halloween and the Day of the Dead, I'm going to use El Día de los Muertos as an example of sort of my cultural example, if you will. Hold on. Okay, so just to let you know what I was doing, I pulled up the chat. I realized that there were two things up there, but now I realize they have nothing to do with me. So with that being said, I do want to encourage all of us to participate. I hear from Megan and from Sherry that you guys have been really participatory, which is exciting for me, because though I will bring best practices and though I might share what other teachers have shared with me, this is where I get the majority of my fantastic ideas. I get them from you and I get them from sessions like these. And I know that as language teachers, we tend to be in our silos. We're super creative, but in our silos. And this is our opportunity to share our wealth of ideas. So I do want to encourage you to share your ideas. All right, so we are going to talk about El Día de los Muertos and how we can leverage something like this to create a deeper awareness and intercultural connections with our students. One of the ways that we can do that is to make personal connections. And one of the easy ways that we can do that is by getting them to explore their own culture. And in this case, for example, El Día de los Muertos, one of the questions that we can ask our students to get them thinking is, ¿qué fiesta tradicional se celebra en tu comunidad? ¿Participan ustedes en la celebración? ¿Qué sabes? And then after they discuss that, or they get, they start to write those down and get those ideas, then we can talk about ¿qué sabes sobre el Día de los Muertos? And we can get into that element of culture. Do we do anything like that? Do we do anything like that to get our students to explore their own culture before we get into perhaps Hispanic culture? If you have a fun way of getting your students to explore their own culture before you talk about another culture, go ahead and write that in the chat. We're going to use videos, but we're not just going to blanket show them a video. We want to make sure that what we do in our classroom has a purpose, right? We are going to ask students to make observations and to pose questions. In order to facilitate that for our students, we're going to mute the video, right? Oh, I like how Bonnie added who comes to that celebration. So Bonnie says she asked students, what big celebrations are in your home? What do you do? And who comes? And Megan says that she likes to draw students' attention to things that we do in our culture that, when viewed from the outside, might seem weird. But for us, they're a part of our traditions and rituals, right? Absolutely. And we're going to talk about things that might seem weird to others. And we are going to talk about how we need to ensure that our students don't view other cultures as being weird, right? That's a really important thing. And we'll definitely look at some unique cultural practices a little bit later. But one of the ways that we can get our students to explore another culture is perhaps watching a video that's muted, allowing them to infer using visual cues. In order to prepare our students to be able to talk about what they see, we might have to pre-teach some key vocabulary words. And in this case, vocabulary words that make sense, that wouldn't be part of their vocabulary words for their chapter, would be calavera, el difunto, la ofrenda, la muerte. la empresa, right? And we can provide sentence frames for them. We want to make sure that our students have those easy sentence starters, like ¿qué es? Or hay una calavera. Hopefully not un difunto, right? Es, son, and tienen are really easy sentence starters that we can use that allow our students to express themselves. And Rich says that he's a big fan of See, Think, Wonder during the making observations step of the image model. So simple, but really effective. Thank you, Rich, for sharing that. Okay, so we are going to experience a video muted, and hopefully you'll let me know how this is different. Oops, I went too fast. How this is different than watching it with audio. And I want us to see what we observe to make cultural inferences. Remember, we are making observations and posing questions. Making observations and posing questions. And I think we were about there. So I'm going to stop it there because it is a little bit of a long video. What are some of the observations that we made? What are some of the observations that we think that our students would make just by seeing that? Where they are certainly setting is an important element, right? And they were where? They're in a cemetery. It looks like now they were painting calaveras and now skulls, and now they are in a factory of sorts. I wonder what all these bags of things, I mean, I wonder what this is. I wonder what they're made out of, right? Certainly. So now let's continue to watch the video with audio. And we can see how that changes things, right? We would ask our students to make those questions, and now with the audio, we can see if we can answer or confirm our predictions. So just like in the image model, we were making predictions and we're making hypotheses, and now we're going to revisit those hypotheses, right? We're going to see if with the audio, it changes our perception of things.
En la celebración de Día de Muertos, alrededor de la República Mexicana, las personas acostumbran festejar a sus difuntos con distintos homenajes. En las casas montan una ofrenda para demostrarles que siguen presentes más allá de la muerte. En los altares, ¿quién no reconoce las famosas calaveras de azúcar? Es así como nos adentramos en la historia de una empresa 100% mexicana que desde hace 14 años, con un proceso artesanal, se dedica a la elaboración de calaveras de azúcar.
Esto es familiar, por parte de la familia de mi esposo. Mi esposo lo inicia, pero después él se retira y ya me quedo yo con el negocio. Sigo adelante porque...
So,
Hold on. this game? Or my conference?
So I'm going to go ahead and I wonder if we can mute everyone. Megan. Unmute myself. There I go. So, if we had some questions like, I wonder what they're made out of. Are they porcelain? Are they cement? Perhaps we've answered our question with the video saying que son calaveras de azúcar. And so, continuing to explore, making questions and getting those answered through the same resource. It's one of the ways that we can use authentic resources. And here I have some other ways that we can engage our students. And this is a way to build understanding and check comprehension, right? So I can ask questions like, ¿Qué está haciendo el señor? Or I can ask cierto falso questions, true or false questions. If this is an interpretive activity, then perhaps I would use cierto falso, right? Because I wouldn't want my students to produce target language in an interpretive activity. I can ask simple questions like either or questions, like ¿Es internacional o es de una familia? Perhaps our students could infer from the video that it's a family-owned business. What are some other strategies that you use to check for comprehension when using an authentic video like this? Is there something that you do that's unique? Is there something that you do that is purposeful? I have a colleague that does el señor bobo. Have you ever heard of that strategy? I don't know how comfortable I would be calling myself la señora boba, but he feels really comfortable. He's a very silly teacher, effective, very, very effective, but silly teacher. And he says a bunch of wrong statements and his students have to correct him. So that's when he calls himself el señor bobo. Well, he'll say statements that are wrong, like, están haciendo calaveras de papel. And they would have to say, no, son de azúcar, for example, right? Being, again, really purposeful, understanding the grammar point for that chapter and encouraging our students to chime in. But we know that there's nothing more powerful than reflections when it comes to acquiring something new. And what we're doing with our students when we're talking about culture is broadening their cultural perspective. And so one of the easiest ways to do this is having a reflections journal. And you can do this as simply as having a notebook where your students would write reflections, cultural reflections. You could do it online, right? Within our program, we have an online notebook, but there are millions of ways that you can do this online, right? They can have a digital notebook through Google. There, you can have a T-chart, but you also might want to structure it a little bit, have a little more structure to it. For example, doing observaciones, preguntas, and comparaciones. And the comparaciones column is really helpful when you're comparing perhaps your own culture to the culture that you're exploring, or to like two different cultures, two cultures that are not your own. One of the easiest cultures to compare, especially in October, is Halloween and El Día de los Muertos. And I know this has probably been a super theme with this conference, just because it's been in October. But this might be a way that you can really get into the overlapping features, right? How do our festivities overlap? How are they similar? And how can we draw those connections? And this is a way that we can do that, right? This lets us, draw out what's similar and draw out what's different. We can consider various places and individuals. We can ask students to collaborate with their classmates, sharing their ideas. And in terms of the communication, right, how do we make sure that our students are able to communicate effectively based on their activity? We can either have them share out or we can have them write down, right? We can have them write a summary on their reflection about these cultural experiences. You can also dig a little deeper, right? El Día de los Muertos is not just about calaveras and those kinds of things. It's a real tradition that has some real sentiment. And it's about honoring the people that have passed, right? I am lucky enough to live in a Mexican neighborhood, not only because I get to speak Spanish, but because they have amazing food and I get to eat it. But one of the delis that I routinely go to in the month of November has a huge altar to all the people that have passed in their family. It's a family-owned deli, and it's just a beautiful display honoring the people in their family that are no longer here. And so I think it's important that we give these festivities and these cultural practices the respect that is deserving of them, right? We don't want to see these cultural practices as just these weird or fun things that other people do that we don't do, right? It's important that we really attribute the respect that it deserves. And this might be a way that our students could make that connection, right? So how does your family celebrate those that have passed? Perhaps they celebrate their birthdays, perhaps they do another homage. And then we can explore how in the Mexican tradition, they do it with El Día de los Muertos. But El Día de los Muertos, I know that it's getting a lot of airtime with this conference, or I'm assuming. But of course, that's not the only cultural connection that we can make with our students, right? We have Carnaval. And Carnaval, there's something similar in the United States. I mean, we have the Easter Bunny and all that other stuff, but it is still attached to Easter. So is Carnaval, right? Carnevale is where you can eat meat before you have to stop eating meat. And then of course we have Los Reyes Magos. That's another fun one that's coming up. And you can bring cultural experiences to your students in different ways. You can use images like pictures. You can use videos. We saw that. One of the ways that I like to bring culture into my classroom is by bringing things that I've acquired during my travels, right? And you can do that by bringing little figurines. Figurines are really huge, at least where I'm from, figurines are really huge for Three Kings Day. So bringing those in, but you can also bring in reading. And I know that especially for our level 1, perhaps authentic reading is difficult for our students, but you might find reading that is tailored to their level. And I know I have done a lot of this myself. I have taken a lot of authentic pieces, literature, informational texts, and I have modified them to meet my students' reading level. Perhaps with your own program, or if you're looking for a program, Auténtico certainly has authentically inspired cultural pieces that have been modified to meet your students' reading level. Certainly another way to bring culture into the classroom. A personal preference of mine is using art, right? Art like this For example, for el Día de la Independencia, Independence Day, or el Día de la Raza, these art that is tied to something that's so emotive can be really powerful, because the artist is really intentional with their message. And so our students are allowed that opportunity to really dive in and explore with patience and really be cognizant of what the artist is trying to, the message that the artist is trying to send, right? And of course, food. I know that we already use food in our classroom. It is one of the most exciting cultural components that we can bring into our classroom. And we can eat them, right? And hopefully we've all had breakfast, that I'm not going to get you hungry with this slide. But, you know, we can talk about some of the foods that we have in common. Perhaps not everybody eats arepas, right? This woman is making arepas, but we all eat corn in North America, Central America, and South America. And we can explore how corn shows up in different ways as a staple of all of our diets. We can talk about, you know, what they drink, mate, and how it's different in South America, and also recipes, right? Like bringing actual recipes into the classroom. Another opportunity to use that image model, right? They can pose questions, they can examine their own perspectives, generate hypotheses, and make comparisons, right? Oh, so Katie, you know what, Katie, thank you for making that note. She says, for non-Spanish speakers, can you please give key terms in English? Certainly, I will make everything. I'll make sure that I speak 100% English from now on. I'm so sorry if I was exclusionary. I apologize. Okay, so looking at intercultural exploration, right? We have a lot of unique cultural practices across the Hispanic world, across the Spanish-speaking world. And La Tomatina is an example of one that I've been to, being from Spain. But it's important that we don't present these in our classroom as odd cultural practices or as something weird, right? It's important that we honor those traditions by exploring deeper, right? We can start with posing those questions. Based on what you see here, what are some of the questions that we have, right? Let's do that. Based on what you see here, what are some questions that you have? What are some questions that you can pose? What are some questions that arise? Perhaps one of your students would ask, what is that red stuff? What are they going to do with all of the tomatoes? What is being celebrated? Certainly. Why do they do it? Oh, you guys this is a deep group. Your students are really deep. Mine are like, oh, what's that red gooey stuff? So yeah, absolutely. This is an opportunity to allow your students to just go beyond what they see, right? And really dig deep and asking those questions that make sense, that then you can make deeper connections to their own cultural experiences, right? Then we can examine their own perspectives. Where do you come from? And how does your perspective, how does that affect you as an observer, right? How does that create a lens for what you are seeing? And then we can generate hypotheses And having that hypothesis, we can dig deeper, make comparisons, and really begin our exploration in earnest. I'm going to pose a question to the group. Have we done cultural stations in our classrooms? Have we ever experienced that? Have we ever set up cultural stations in our classrooms? Oftentimes we don't have the time in our classroom. Pacing is always a challenge with language acquisition, isn't it? Oh yeah, Laura does. Okay, not all of us have, so that's exciting. We can explore something new because pacing is always a challenge in our classrooms, right? We always feel like there's so much to do and not enough time to do it in. Stations is a really nice way to set up your classroom so that your students are moving from one station to the next. It's often used in primary literacy, classrooms. But it's an effective way to explore culture. And we can look at some examples that we have for possible station activities. So the idea is that your students would start with the station and then continue and then and possibly even do a reflecting activity. Or you can spread these stations out for multiple days, right? Maybe you can have 2 stations. But this is an example of a set of stations all within a theme, right? It's important that these stations all have one unifying theme. And this unifying theme is going to be food. I'm sorry. Anybody who knows me knows that I have food as a central theme for everything that I do, it seems. But this is something that we can start our students off with, a cultural comparison. And I'm going to translate this into English. Is there a tradition or a celebration that your family, in which your family eats something special? What is it? What is that special thing that they eat? How do you prepare it? Is there something special that they do as they are preparing that special food? And so it's saying, go ahead and explain, right? It says, explicar, to explain. Do you believe that it is important to maintain the tradition of preparing that special food? And why? Right, so this first activity gets our students to explore their own traditions, their own culture, and it can be unique to their own family, right? It might be something very unique. I didn't realize till last year that people make lasagna. Is it for Christmas? For Thanksgiving? Is it for Christmas? I think it was Christmas. They make lasagna after the turkey. I'd never experienced that, ever. And my father's American. I thought that I had a handle on American culture, but I didn't. The next station activity that you perhaps could explore is, let me just move my little chat feature. This 3-column chart, which has the observations, questions, and comparisons. So your students can first observe what they see, make observations, make note what they see, and then ask questions based on what they see, and then perhaps some cultural comparisons. Now, this is a woman making buñuelos, which are kind of like donuts, except they're not really. You dip them in hot chocolate, which is incredible.
Las fallas no serían lo mismo sin los buñuelos con chocolate, al menos eso es lo que dice la tradición. Cada año, valencianos y turistas disfrutan durante estos días de esta dulce combinación que se puede comer a cualquier hora del día.
Y venimos directamente de comer, y estos son los postres.
So good. Have we had buñuelos before? They're incredible. And I know that these buñuelos are different than Central American buñuelos, which I've never had. But these are fun. They're kind of like churros, except they're fluffier and amazing, and they're crazy delicious. So this is another station activity that you can do, all relating to food that you eat during festivities. Oops. And then we have a piece of art. Are we familiar with this artist, Carmen Lomas Garza? She is a wonderful artist that really brings to the forefront Mexican-American experiences, which is valid. We spend so much time exploring, you know, cultures, Hispanic or Spanish-speaking cultures outside of the United States, that it's important to validate the Spanish-speaking cultures that live here as well, right? And how they've evolved and how they're unique in and of themselves. Oh, great. So Laura uses Auténtico and she uses this and she loves it. Oh, great. So Sherry uses it too. That's fantastic. Yeah, this is a really great piece that allows your students to spend some time really discovering what they see here. And you can ask questions like, ¿Quiénes son? Or who are they, right? What are they doing? Is this a complicated or a simple process? And then how do they feel? Right? You can explore, how do the people in this piece of art feel? And your students will notice that, you know, that they're not upset, that they're happy to be doing this really complicated process of making tamales. And I'm sure you have, many of us have experienced this. I haven't, but I remember teaching a student whose mother would sell tamales, and they would spend, they spent so much time, and it was like an entire family ordeal. And it was him, or it was he, who told me that there's a lot of lard in tamales, or at least in the ones that he made in his family. Because I would always come to class with at least 2 or 3 tamales. And then he was the one that was like, señorita, there's a lot of fat in there, but it's so good. So if you haven't had a tamal, please eat them. You won't regret it. Anyway, I do not mean to get sidetracked on food, but a fantastic piece that is really engaging for your students, as attested by so many of you on the call today. What's another station activity? Well, you can have them read a piece of text that has been modified for their reading level. And this is an example of that. And you can have some questions on the side. What is it? When do they make them and eat them? What are the ingredients? And what are the traditions that surround el roscón de Reyes, or la rosca de Reyes? It's called different things in different places, but the purpose is the same: to enjoy something wonderful with families in the holiday. Then, of course, you know, as a wrap up to this station activity, we can have students compare their own opinions and perspectives from the start of the station activities to what was expressed, the resources in the stations, right? So, you know, it's important that our students evolve. It's important that we evolve. It's important that we are evolving culturally, as individuals and as a society. So it's important that we celebrate our students, you know, changing perspectives as well. And this is one of the ways that we can do that, right? And it's a really, really quick turnaround. And this is another opportunity to really bring in that cultural perspectives and cultural reflection notebook. I know that we've experienced this, and I know that we experience it with our students, but you know, you can have a thought, and oftentimes it's fleeting, oftentimes it comes in and it goes. But when you write it down, that's when you begin to cement it, right? That's when you begin to have that space and that time to ask further questions. And it just, writing things down gives your brain that moment. So I really encourage it as a practice. And if we do want to change their cultural perspectives, It's a fantastic way to do it. And then, of course, we don't want to leave out the taking action piece, right? So we can have our students invite members of their communities that they've met in these stations to a local celebration featuring a special food, right? This is just an example, but essentially ask yourself, how can we branch out of our classroom? How can our students pull in or reach out? How can they broaden their cultural awareness and perspective, not only in our classroom, but how do we make it a practice in their lives? And this is certainly, this is dependent on the community that you live in, right? For me and my students, it would be really easy because, you know, I live in Brooklyn. And so we just have a wide variety of cultures cohabitating, and it's a beautiful thing. But it, you know, maybe it's not as easy as walking to the corner deli for your students, right? So really exploring what your community has to offer and figuring out how your students can branch out and really be a part of that community. So we did look at a lot of things today, and we are about 3 minutes to time. We certainly know how to use authentic resources, how we can bring them into the classroom, certainly to increase communicative proficiency, but also to develop an intercultural competence. And that intercultural is keyword there, right? We want to make sure that our students are experiencing introspection and then making those connections with cultural practices that are different but similar, right? Because we all have an element that binds us. So that is a very good question. The calaveras video that I showed is in our program. So you know what, I am going to, they're all available for you. I'm going to put it in the chat. Oops, realize.com. I think it's try autentico. That should be a live link. Let me just let's try this out. And then you can sign up for a demo. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but a lot of things are downloadable. So even if you're not looking for a program in your district, oh my gosh, I hope my boss isn't on the line, but a lot of things are downloadable. So explore it, go on there and see what you can grab. So that isn't it. Here.
While Mary is finishing up her links and adding some things to the chat there, I will take this opportunity to thank everybody for coming to this session with Mary. And we welcome and encourage your feedback on these sessions, this one included. So please use the link in the PDF program, or that should be found in the chat. I think Sherry may have shared that already, but if not, you can reach out, or again, you can find it in the PDF program. The recording of this session will be available to conference registrants after the event. And as a reminder for those of you in Pennsylvania, in order to qualify for this session, or in order to qualify this session for Act 48 credit, you must complete the Act 48 reflection form, which you can find linked in the PDF program or in the chat. They must be completed within 72 hours. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I put the link in there, and you can go ahead and try a demo. And you can have all the stuff right there. Pascale, try the second link that I put in there, the longer one. Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.